Joining us now, Tom Coburn. Tom, former Republican senator from the great state of Oklahoma. Tom is a fiscal and social conservative. He's known for a very long time, too, as fierce opposition to deficit spending and pork barrel projects, and for his stance on life. And Tom is now also head of the Convention of States, which is the organization to have a convention of the states in order to change the Constitution. And there's a whole series of things that have to go with that. 38 states have to ratify anything. They have to get together to convene it. And one of the big issues always on the table for that is the idea to have a constitutionally balanced budget. A lot of people, though, oppose convention of states because it's a tiger by the tail. Who knows what's going to happen? And a lot of people say we need to just abide by the Constitution we have, not rewrite any parts of it. Joining us now to break this down for us, former Senator Oklahoma Tom Coburn. Senator, good to have you with us, man.
Hey, thank you. Thanks for having me. You know, it's really interesting. The annotated Constitution that we now have, that the bureaucrats have created, weighs 82 pounds when you stack all the papers up. And the Constitution our founders wrote is about 12 pages. So there's something really different about what was intended of our founders and versus what we have today. And, you know, I'd just be real frank with you. There's nothing that I'm afraid of when it comes to having an amendments convention of the states, because the jurisprudence and the rules on that are clear as a bell. And the safety net, as you mentioned, is you got to have 13. You got to have everybody agreeing. In other words, 38 states have to say, yeah, we want more of our rights taken away. We want less freedom of speech. We want less gun rights. None of that's going to happen. And it's not going to happen, first of all, because those amendments would never get sent to the states for ratification, because they're not under the application that's being made for a convention. So most of the people that are talking fear, one is they don't know the actual aspects of an Article 5 convention. But the other thing is our country wasn't built on fear. It's built on courage. And if you want to be afraid of something, you ought to be afraid of the runaway federal government that we have today, that's taking more of your rights away every day, that's lessening your economic freedom every day, and it concentrating more and more power, not where you have an impact on it, but where bureaucrats have it. And so if we like all our decisions being made by bureaucrats in Washington, we shouldn't do this. But if you want to restore us back to what we were intended, not change. We're not talking about changing anything. We're talking about restoring the Constitution to the regular balance of power between the three branches of the government and between the government, the federal government, and the states.
So, Senator Coburn, for our audience, this kind of went off the table when Trump got elected. Okay, I can just be honest with you. It just kind of went off our radar screen. We were on to something else. But walk us through the logistics of this, because, like, for our listeners now, in order to convene an Article 5 convention, just to convene it, like, how many states have to pass it in their state legislatures? How many states have to do that? And then after that, to get anything done, that's got to get ratified. How many states have to do that? Just walk us through how this thing would work.
Well, the Constitution requires that to have an amendments convention, two things are required. 2/3 of the states have to agree to do that. And number two is they have to aggregate their applications. That means their applications have to be the same subject matter. In other words, you can't just call a convention of the states and talk about anything you want to. You have to have a resolution passed by the houses and senates in all the states that say we want to have a convention of amendments that talks about these things. So that's the first requirement. And it did go off the table a little bit, but not much. With four states passed it this year. We're at 12 states. We probably still have a chance at North Carolina. So we could have passed. This could be at 13. So we're well over a third there in 2.5 years. And it's a high bar. You know, to get 34 states to agree to anything is hard. So, but once you have that, then the Congress has to, by law, call an amendments convention. And the only thing they get to do is set the date and the location. And then each state, through their legislative bodies, would send commissioners with their credentials. And once their credentials are okayed by that group, who has elected a speaker and a parliamentarian, then they meet. And the only thing they can work on are things under the application that has been made. So one is fiscal responsibility, one's limit, scope, and jurisdiction, and one's term limits on both appointed and elected officials. So that's the only thing they can consider. But whatever comes out of there has to be inside that application. Otherwise, Congress will never send whatever comes out of the application to the states because it doesn't meet the requirements of the application. So whatever comes out of there has to be in those three subject areas that I talked about. And then the states, 38 states, have to approve it. And if you're worried about this, all you have to do is say, well, that means it only takes the judiciary chairman in 13 states of either the House or Senate say, we're not hearing this, and it doesn't happen. So it's just a recommendation back to the states. If you want to restore your freedom and the balance of power, and you want to quit doing nonsense that some federal bureaucrat that was never elected to do anything is telling your state to do, you have the opportunity to do that.
All right, but Senator, in reality, I mean, getting to 38 states, you look at the state breakdown now, this is a very steep task. You got 12 now. You know, there's a couple more pretty deep red states. North Carolina is one that you mentioned. You might get there. You need to get to 34 states. So you've got 12 now, so you need to get to 22 additional states. Is there, like, the states that have voted for it now in their general assemblies, is there a statute of limitations? Does that run out? Do you have a certain amount of time, and then it has to start over? Or does that
not unless they put it in it. I think two states have. Oklahoma put a 7-year time limit, then it has to be reconsidered. But most of them are open-ended. There's 450 applications sitting with Congress right now for amendments convention and dating back 100 years on all sorts of things, from reversing Roe v. Wade to balanced budget amendment. There's applications from states on those things. So they're there until they're withdrawn or they run out of time based on what the application made originally. But look, our country's worth fighting this fight. Do you think Washington's ever going to give us back and change those things?
No.
There's never been a federal government in history that has ceded power voluntarily back to its people. And ask yourself, 50 years ago, what kind of freedoms did we have versus what do we have today? We didn't have federal bureaucrats telling us what we would do, what size light bulb, and where. There's no light bulbs made in America anymore because we've, in our brilliance, have decided that there's only a couple types of light bulbs you can have, and we're not going to make them here. We're going to have made overseas because we can make them cheaper. But had you been still using the regular luminescent light bulbs, we'd still have been making light bulbs here. So a bureaucrat decided that. Congress never voted on that. A bureaucrat decided that. Same thing with how much water goes down your potty. So the whole idea is to rebalance and this is the only tool we as Americans have that's big enough to fix the problems that we have. And our founders were prescient to put this in. They knew we would be at this point. And when people don't trust the federal government, when bureaucracies make decisions without the empowerment that they should have of the people, by the people, for the people, it's time for us to fix it. I'm not sure we're going to win, but we don't have to win. If we get to 28 states, Congress is going to say, oh, my God, these guys are serious. We better balance the budget. Mm-hmm. And I can give you all sorts of stories on the downside of the $545 billion a year that the government spends that's stupid, duplicity, fraudulent, and inconsequential, that doesn't need to be spent, and the Government Accountability Office agrees with that. That's the reason I left the Senate. I couldn't get anybody to help me get rid of that. So if we have an out-of-control behemoth federal government, we need to fix it.
Right.
And our founders gave us the tool to do it.
Senator, walk us through the difference. A lot of us a little bit longer in the tooth like me, we remember the argument for the Equal Rights Amendment, the ERA, that was making its way through state houses. Tell us the difference between the Equal Rights Amendment and why that failed, and how the Convention of States, how that's different, and how you see how that might be successful.
Well, the Equal Rights Amendment did a whole lot of things that came out of the Congress. There's two ways to offer amendments. One is 2/3 of both houses of Congress offer an amendment and goes to the states. Then there's the way we're proposing, which is a convention of states where we decide what changes might ought to be made and recommended to the states. Under Supreme Court law now, you have 7 years to approve an amendment. All right? We're not talking about controversial amendments. That was a highly controversial amendment, and it died because it ran out of time, and 38 states didn't approve it. We're talking about restoring the balance to your state legislature so that they can actually start making decisions for the people in Virginia rather than the bureaucracy in Washington, D.C. making decisions for the people of Virginia. So it's a totally different thing. Will all the amendments that come out of an amendments convention within those three parameters that I mentioned pass? I have no idea. Here's the plan. We now have 2.2 million volunteers throughout this country. By the end of this year, we're hoping to be over 5. By the end of next year, we're hoping to be over 10 million because people that things need to change. So if you have 10 million volunteers out there and you send amendments that are common sense, that restore the balance of power, and you have an army of 10 million volunteers, we'll get it through the legislatures.
Right.
All right. It's not just about the idea. It's about people being in charge of their own government again.
So, Tom, after the Convention of States convenes, let's say you get to 34 states, it's a long shot, but let's say that happens, and then you agree to a series of constitutional amendments. Let's say it's a balanced budget amendment. You pick whatever. Then that's not a done deal, right? That then has to go back.
No, it's just simply a recommendation to the states, and 38 states would have to agree to it.
Right.
So
you
what
need
are the
34 states to convene.
Go ahead.
So you need 34 states to convene, and then whatever recommendations you make, that goes back to the states, and then 38 states have to sign off on it.
That's correct.
Right? All right, that's the way it works.
That's correct.
All right, we've got a question for you. One of our callers, Joe in Williamsburg, has a question for Senator Coburn. You're on the air. Go ahead, Joe in Williamsburg.
Hey, first and foremost, sir, now I didn't catch who you were initially, but first, now that I know who you are, Senator, I don't throw admiration out there very much, but I admire a man who can walk away from power. It speaks to a godliness inside of you that is to be admired and emulated. I mean, without trying to stroke your feathers too hard here, sir, that sounds a lot like Washington when he walked away from a crown. You're to be admired for that, sir, and I appreciate your taking up this fight, okay? I don't have very many pleasant things to say about politicians in the first place, but you would definitely rank differently. I wouldn't even use the term politician to describe you. A leader comes to mind. So, that being said, sir, I'm looking for a little bit of education here, schooling, and I humbly ask you, I'm looking at my copy of the Constitution in Article 5. Where do you derive the concept that you have to have the states all concur with what's being talked about at the convention?
Well, the states don't have to. The states don't have to concur with what's being talked about, but they have to make a similar application in the range of subject matter. So, otherwise, there's a concept, and this all came out of all our foundational meetings before our constitutional. It's called aggregation. And for you to meet the 34-state threshold, those applications have to aggregate. They have to be the same, essentially the same application. Otherwise, they don't qualify in the counting for the 2/3 requesting for a convention of states.
So, Senator, if you look ahead to the remainder of 2017, you've got 12 states now. How many states in 17, 18 are on your radar screen?
Well, we have applications filed in all 37 other states. I would expect we'll get from 6 to 10 states next year. I think we'll get North Carolina. I think we'll get South Carolina. I think we'll get Mississippi. I think we'll get New Mexico. We'll get South Dakota, Iowa, Montana, and Wyoming. easily probably Idaho and Utah as well. So those are all potentials for this next year. And then what we do is we focus our grassroots on the next set of states. We don't have the power to go to every state legislature every day and say, here's why we think you ought to do this. But you'd be amazed at how many state legislators would love to have the freedom to start making decisions for their own state instead of having a bureaucrat tell them what they'll do for their state that was never elected to anything. So the process is a high bar. We admit that. But we think America's worth fighting for that.
Tom, how do we stand in Virginia?
Virginia, we have an application file. Of course, it's difficult in Virginia because the northern part of Virginia is resistant. They want more power, more government, more central government. The rest of Virginia is supportive of this. So we have not gotten through committees that I'm aware of. I can look it up real quick. And we've not been able to achieve that. But we won't give up because the vast majority of the Virginians love freedom. And it's just about education. It's really interesting since Donald Trump became president. This has become much more of a bipartisan effort because people really don't want the federal government making all their decisions for them. And so if you're hard left, you really don't want Donald Trump making executive decisions. You want your state where you can actually have an influence making those decisions.
I just want to give this shout out. In Virginia, one of your leaders that is very articulate in explaining this is a Republican House of Delegates member in Central Virginia by the name of Lee Ware. He's been on our show several times, a good friend of mine. And I was not really in favor of convention states just because it's kind of like a tiger without a tail. Who knows what's going to happen? But every time I talk to Lee Ware, Delegate Ware, he's very convincing on this issue. He's kind of changed my mind on it. So you definitely want to keep him in the mix. He's does a fabulous job. Senator Coburn, I'm out of time here on the John Fredericks Show. I want to thank you for being with us. Former Senator from Oklahoma, Republican Tom Coburn, now the head of Convention of States. If you want more information, you can go to conventionofstates.com. That's conventionofstates.com. Senator, thanks for being with us today. And
thank you.
Good luck
God bless
going
you, John.
forward.
Take care.